Hi everyone, welcome back to the Echo Chamber podcast. Today we're revisiting the topic of social media in our third episode.
My name is Julia.
I'm Kaylee.
And Kaylee, I have a mesmerizing question for you to begin our podcast today.
I would love to hear it.
Would you say that overall throughout your life, social media has been a negative or a positive influence on your mental health?
My life or like the lives of general people?
Your life.
Okay, actually the answer is the same for both of them, so we don't really have to we don't have to distinguish that. Negative. Just overwhelmingly negative. What about you?
I'd say the same thing, overwhelmingly. And I think if anybody has seen even 1/3, not even 1/16
minutes
of our past 6 minutes even of our past 2 episodes of our podcast, then that will have come as no surprise. So, because here at Echo Chamber, since the start, we have been very interested in exploring a bunch of different perspectives. Today, we want to bring in some positives about social media as well. So if you're a social media lover, this is for you. This goes out to you. Dedicated to you.
I think everyone's a social media lover. That's the problem. Anyway, don't need to start off so strong. We have a couple different topics to cover here today. And I would say the primary one that we're going to talk about is personality in relation to online behavior.
So how do you behave online?
How do I behave online?
Mm-hmm.
I would say minimally at first, which I think was really good.
Yeah?
Now I'm engaged a lot more in social media, but I would say I use it a lot more productively than I used to because I am becoming increasingly more aware of my habits surrounding social media. So I feel like most people don't get the opportunity or the time away to think about how they use social media, which is why the online behavior and encouraged behavior and personality traits that interact with social media largely is a thing that we should definitely cover.
Yes. I found a very interesting source for our podcast this week that talks about exactly what you just said. Okay, let me just read you the quotation. So, it says, although routine use of social media is associated with positive health outcomes, emotional attachment to social media use is associated with negative health outcomes. Studies reported that excessive use of social media has found to be correlated with depressive symptoms, self-esteem, general and physical appearance anxiety, and body dissatisfaction. So that brings up a very interesting point that I feel like we've talked a little bit about in our past episodes, about how a little bit of very intentional social media use is a good thing, but it becomes a bad thing when you have too much of it, and as this study says, when you're emotionally attached to it. So I thought that was a very interesting point.
So I actually have a directly opposing source for what you just said. And I'm trying to find it right now. I actually did one of my English assignments using this source because I found it super interesting.
That source was also, I'm not sure if it's the most reliable because it was a study that it was just like an analysis of 16 other studies that fell into the exact criteria that they were not that they were looking for, but like the research that they could use to make the point they were trying to make, obviously. But the sample size was really small because they only ended up being able to use 16 papers, like 16 research projects in their final. So I'm curious to see what source you're about to bring to the table.
Okay. So what I found was a source by Jessica Hamilton, who's a researcher in child and adolescent psychopathology. And I found the source super interesting because what I find to be the primary audience of the social media problem is youth and how it's affecting youth. Not to say it isn't a problem for adults, older adults or young adults, but I think if we were going to fix a problem, we would have to fix it at its root, which is the newest generation. And it's titled Where It Hurts the Most, Peer Interactions on Social Media and in Person. and how they're differently associated with emotional reactivity and sustained effect among adolescent girls. So this particular research was done on 110 girls, and they used the ecological momentary assessment for 16 days. And each of the girls had to evaluate the last prompt that they had, the context of which a negative or positive interaction occurred either in social media or in person, and the emotional reactivity during the interaction. And what they found, I'm going to read this directly because I'm going to fuck it up if I try to say it normally, is the results after data analysis indicated that negative peer interactions that occurred through social media were more likely to be associated with the sustained negative emotional effect, but not immediate negative emotional reaction. Positive interactions experienced through social media were more likely to have a lower emotional interaction and were not sustained over time. But basically, what that study was saying is that regardless of the interaction that you have with social media, it has a negative effect because the positive interactions that you're having are less sustained over time and felt less emotionally in general. So if you have a super positive interaction online, you're not going to remember it 5 minutes from then, and it's also going to be not as much enjoyment or not as much of a hit of adrenaline or dopamine to your system as a negative interaction online would. Opposing that, the negative interactions online are sustained over time. So if you have a outrightly negative interaction online, you're still thinking about it weeks later. It's still affecting your mood. It's still having an outcome. However, the flip side of that is that you don't feel the initial impact of the negative activity online. So you can't look at it objectively and be like, this is having a negative impact on me. I should stop, because you don't feel it in that initial impact. You feel it weeks and weeks on from that. So positive or negative, the interaction that you're having with social media is distinctly the opposite of everything the human race should be striving for.
I have a bit of a counterpoint. What about finding a sense of community? Because that seems like a positive. And let's say it's like a good community to be a part of. And because our I feel like the positives of one interaction are surely better than having a positive interaction online is better than having a negative one in real life, even though one's in real life and one's online, right? How so?
I agree so much. Because there's a superficial level to interacting online. Whatever the fuck that was, Siri was doing something. There's a superficial level of interacting online. I think negative interaction in person is a lot healthier than positive interaction online, because you're having that face-to-face conflict. You have that immediate consequence. If you say something ludicrous or if you do something wrong, you have accountability in that moment. You can't really escape it. It's an in-person interaction. Not to mention, I think conflict is super important for people, just to learn how to interact with people, to learn how to compose themselves, to learn what to say and what not to say. And with there being such a small amount of accountability online, even within positive communities, you have very little room for improvement, because you can't rise in a level. You can't rise in social media. You can learn how to talk better to people through text, using acronyms. You can learn to better communicate your ideas. But if you're getting immediate negative feedback when you're talking to a person, you're going to fix that. It's almost unbearable.
I see more of what you're saying now, I think.
Also, point out that the vast majority of interaction that's happening through social media is not positive. That's something that you have to pay attention to. But the vast majority of interaction that people, especially youth, have through social media is not a positive experience. Even if they find that good community, there are thousands of other ones that are really, really bad for their mental health. So even comparing positive interactions online to negative interactions in person, I would still lean towards the real life experience, not just for the accountability reason, but for the fact that I don't really see the percentage of likelihood interacting online being a positive one as a huge percentage.
I do suppose there's also the direct ways that people's behavior changes when they're online versus when they're in person. Because in one of the articles I read, there was a mention that people are far more likely to lie when they're on social media. It's that the anonymous aspect of it. So that also influences a lot of the interaction that you get on social media versus in real life. Because if you're interacting with people who are more likely to lie and maybe say something outrageous just to get a reaction out of you, make up stories for likes. I mean, we've all seen it happen for sure on the internet. Like, it's not like it's rare, it's very commonplace. That also, like, all those lies that have to have an effect on relationships, social media, all of that.
Deeper than that, even beyond just the fact that you don't have anyone to. I mean, you know how banks have a know who you're banking with policy? Like they'll do background checks on you, or like they just, you can't do fake information, you can't do fake names, you can't do any of that. There's none of that on social media. So beyond just the lying part, I think it takes people who originally have a propensity for caustic behavior and turns it into almost a cycle of encouragement for them. Because these people that are interacting, they're interacting to win. In any sense on social media, you're interacting to be better than the other person. You're interacting to feed your superiority complex. There are two reasons that people interact with social media on a daily basis, and it's either to feed your ego or wait, let me find the exact words that I use. Okay, so it's to feed your ego or to enhance your image or compete. So regardless of whether you're winning and losing or losing in an interaction, you're still participating in the reason why social media is detrimental to mental health. Because you take that caustic behavior and you take no accountability and you shelter it from immediate interpersonal feedback. And it makes the person more likely each time to react in a self-centered, ego-fulfilling way. And pair that with, if you win an argument, your brain already goes through a process and a reward system. You get a hit of dopamine and you get a hit of adrenaline, and it becomes a neural pathway in your brain to seek that out again. So social media allows this highway to dopamine hits constantly.
Through negative interaction.
Right. So even if you're in the bad part of a negative interaction, you still get that adrenaline hit from losing something because that is a normal process happening in your brain. But instead of stepping away from it because you don't feel that immediate negative impact on your emotion, you stay and it builds up over time because it's sustained. Negative interaction is sustained, but not felt in the immediate conversation. Moment, whatever.
I think it also has to do with attention seeking, most likely.
Headed my notebook.
Because the way I was just thinking of it while you were talking is like, because you're like, you wouldn't stand up in a classroom at your university full of 500 people and say something wildly controversial to get a reaction. You'd just get stares and you'd be asked to leave, most likely. Like, that would just be terrible. But in an online forum, you're just gonna post that under a name that is anonymous and can't be traced, and you're gonna get a very different reaction. You're going to get attention. The attention that you wanted, I suppose. Even maybe subconsciously, because I feel like we all want attention to a certain degree.
Say on that point where you said that you stand up in the middle of a classroom, you're just going to get stares and to be asked to leave. I think social media has had such a heavy influence because they've had no accountability that they believe it will happen in real life. There are people that stand up in the middle of a lecture to say something that has nothing to do with it. There are people that come to speeches, like, I think, who is it? It's Matt Walsh or like Michael Knowles or something like that. they were doing a speech with the Young America Foundation at colleges, and this group of people stood up to protest something that he wasn't even talking about, just like one of his separate views. And they were chanting in the middle of this official speech something that had nothing to do with it. And the strange thing is the reaction coming from that wasn't stares. It wasn't asking them to leave. That's the eventual consequence of it if you get too rowdy. But it wasn't a direct consequence. There were people that stood up with them, and there were people that looked at them and booed them, but there was no awkward silence where you have to decide whether this is socially acceptable. So I feel like social media has infringed on our own real lives. Like the world that we live in, people are now interacting with other people like they are in social media, and I think only bad things can come from it.
Another interesting idea. So I was once out at the mall shopping with my mom, who is obviously older than I am, because otherwise that wouldn't make sense at all. So, so I was shopping with my mom, right? And we passed like a person that was probably around like our ages, like early 20s, late teens, whatever. So my mom was like, and this was something that she'd noticed before too, but it happened right in that moment. So she was like, she started talking about how weird it is for her to see like younger people pass each other and completely ignore each other. And ever since she said that, I've paid attention when I walk to and from class on campus at my university, and nobody looks at each other. And apparently, in my mom's day and age, which wasn't even that long ago, like, apparently, like, she'd always be saying hi to people. Like, she'd always be, like, smiling at pedestrians on the street, even. But, like, I go to the same school with these people, and, like, yeah, of course I don't know them. But everybody's, like, looking down at the ground, like, completely. And I feel like passing people, like, it's just such, like, a charged atmosphere all of a sudden, because there's this pressure, like, not to pay attention to them, but also, like, you can't, like, completely ignore them because you don't want to, like, bump into them. But, like, you have to act like you're completely ignoring them. I don't know. Do you know what I'm talking about?
That I know exactly what you're talking about. I hate it so much. I've noticed that before. I usually don't participate in it, but I will notice in myself that I'm distinctly more likely to interact with an age group that is either way above my age or way below my age. For some reason, that peer interaction, it's like polarized magnets. Like I cannot come within 6 feet of you because that's going to be weird. And I don't know why.
Why is it so scary? But, like, maybe it has something to do with the way social media works. Because social media is kind of like that. Like, if social media was a room, like, you would just be passing by all of these people, just, like, not barely acknowledging the things that they're posting, their controversial takes, or what they did with their day or whatever. You're just scrolling through it. Like, you're not paying people any actual attention. So, has that become... And maybe also because social media... Me when I lose my train of thought. Yeah, in that one article I quoted before, there was also a point where they saw studies that measured the negative effects of too much time spent on social media, and one of them was decreased offline interaction, and then also decreased self-esteem. So maybe that's more getting at the root of why we don't look at each other, because our self-esteem is so low. And we aren't necessarily reaching for that interaction offline.
This is consistent with the idea of competition. I cite a lot of information from Jordan Peterson's videos, not just because he's super intelligent himself, but because he interviews a lot of people on really relevant topics that people don't pay attention to a lot. But there's the majority of my information on this topic I got from a video with him and Dr. Jean Twenge, or I don't know what her name is. It was on narcissism and neuroticism, which are the two main personality traits of people who interact readily with social media. And one big topic of that video was the idea of competition within social media. And I think we touched on this in the general episode, but there's a faux celebrity atmosphere with social media, which inherently means that there are people better and there are people worse. And it's now based on you being judged or evaluated on something like counts or comments or DMs or something like that. But Peterson pointed out that there is women and girls in general interact with social media most, and it's usually posting pictures of themselves to seek approval. But beyond that, it's posting pictures of themselves so they get more like counts than the next girl, because that's what's going to make them better in competition. But there's a portion of young girls' lives where they go into puberty around the age of 13. It's getting younger and younger, but around the age of 13, where there's a peak in neuroticism levels, which is going to cause a spike in negative self-esteem and negative self-image and everything like that. That also happens to be when most girls are introduced to social media on a really heavy level. So we have these girls that are interacting with a competitive system that are already having negative image issues without social media in the mix, and then you're seeing these pictures of perfect faux celebrities and a filtered life and everything. Some things that are even real-time filters, like on TikTok, where you can enhance your features real time and cutify yourself pretty much, which they have a filter on, but it still gives you the inferiority complex that you need to do better. So there's something to be said about young girls interacting with social media, particularly at that age, where there's a lot of neuroticism going on anyway, and it's just competition to feel better. Not even be better, just feel better.
Outwardly appear better.
Right. Well, I mean, it translates to internal. This affects mental health really heavily.
Mm-hmm.
And I want to say now it's leaning more towards 50-50. Men and women use social media pretty equally now. But especially in the beginning, when Instagram first started, you would get so many females that post every week and so many men that don't even have a profile picture.
So I found a lot of conflicting information on that, actually, which I found interesting because one of the articles that I read said that men use social media more than women. And I was like, that is interesting, because I feel like for my entire life I've heard it be the other way around. And then they also mentioned in the study that even though they combined the analysis from so many different articles, there wasn't a general consensus that they could find on whether men or women use social media more.
I think it's an important distinction with social media use and social media posting. Because what I was talking about was a competition between girls, which means that they're posting to get likes and to get judgment. If it's social media use, I would argue that men are interacting with those posts with higher frequency than women are. Because I think women post, they like their friends' posts, they give a slay queen comment, and then they're done. I would argue that men spend more time evaluating those posts and providing the judgment that women seek. So I think there's a distinction between using and posting with the competition.
Do you have research that backs that up?
I probably do. It's in my history somewhere. I can send it.
Not particularly helpful. But I would love to see if there's research on that, because I don't know if that's necessarily correct. I feel like both genders participate in both activities.
Well, that's what I was saying before. It's equalizing now. I would say that men and women both have an equal amount of picture, non-picture accounts, anonymous, non-anonymous accounts. I think it's equalizing now. I'm talking about when social media first became quote unquote mandatory. But I have I have statistics that don't exactly relate to it, but I have, from a marriage perspective, a relationship perspective, 1 in 7 divorces, or 1 in 7 divorces are caused by social media. So there's obviously some level of male interaction that's going on there that can cause that kind of conflict that would end something that's supposed to be a lifelong commitment. You could also make the argument that people just aren't as committed now as they were in the past, but this was a 2010 study. So
social media also hasn't been around that long, though. That's something else we need to remember. It's not like we can really draw, 100 years ago, in the 1920s, because there was no social media.
Right. You're so right.
I feel like it's almost strange to say, like, oh, well, now the way the different genders use social media is equalizing, like, what, from like 5 years ago?
Well, I mean, that's not entirely inaccurate because of the amount of engagement that social media gets. It's not like we have a small control group. Everyone is interacting almost every day. So, yes, we don't have a lot of past to recall on, but this is a very accelerated timeline anyway because of how social media progresses.
Yeah, that's another good point. Because I think we can both agree that social media, it goes so much faster. We're just quick.
But it kind of relates back to the ad thing where a couple of years ago Instagram didn't have ads, and now the posts are being updated so much that you can't discern the ads from the original posts. It shows you the progression of social media. It's not just the users that are
progression.
Yeah, it's not just the users that are engaging in social media. Everyone is engaging, which is why I said it's mandatory. Businesses advertise through social media. They have their own accounts. That's how they get a lot of their engagement. It's the progression of social media is very quick and very evolved. So although we don't have years and years of research to back up assumptions or opinions that we make, I think even just in the couple of years that we've been readily using social media, we can see the distinction of certain activities.
True. I mean, even in our relatively short time using social media, I mean, we've had 3 full episodes of things to say.
Yeah, we could film more too. This is the condensed version.
Yeah, we could keep going, and y'all are lucky that we don't. Anyway.
You're lucky.
You're lucky that we don't.
Habitual mode of thought.
Habitual mode of thought?
The idea that social media is more of a habit than anything to enjoy now. But that backs on addiction.
Everybody's on their phone these days. All the time. I especially use the example of me riding the bus to and from school every day. Everybody's on their phone. It's like, even if you were a naturally outgoing, sociable person and you wanted to say something to somebody, how are you when everybody has big over-ear headphones on constantly on the bus all the time? Everybody's like watching TikTok on the bus. It's wild to me. It's so wild. Everyone's always on their phone. And I say that, I feel like that came off as like everyone but me, like I'm enlightened and y'all aren't. I didn't mean for that. I'm chronically on my phone, right there along with everybody else. The whole time on the bus, I am using my phone. So I just want to make that clear.
I'm more on my laptop than my phone nowadays. I'd be heavily into my laptop, YouTube or school
more
assignments.
about but I'm talking more about like when you're like secondarily on your phone. You know what I mean? Because it's not like, oh, I'm on my phone, but I'm also waiting for the bus. Like, I just so happen to be waiting for the bus. It's like, no, my primary function of being in this space and time is that I'm waiting for the bus to take me to class. My secondary thing is I'm on my phone.
I see. So,
yeah.
Like a habit, like you pick it up just because you have nothing else to do, or because you think you have nothing else to do.
And I think that goes into the inability to sit with nothing and just do nothing. Because I've realized recently And this is part of the reason why I feel so passionately about social media impacting mental health, because it impacted my mental health to a ridiculous degree. And so, like, I found myself, I think we talked about this a bit in the first episode, how it's that, like, feeling of constantly, like, wanting something. And then, like, I'm sitting in class and I'm frustrated because it's not as engaging as my phone could be in that moment. And I get, like, annoyed at myself and frustrated that, like, I can't pay attention to what's in front of me because I want to be scrolling through my phone or playing a stupid little block game on my phone instead of listening to what my professor has to say, even though I know that I'd enjoy the lecture more than I would spending that same time on my phone, you know?
Yeah, it's a weird addiction. Because I think I also said when you mentioned this in the first episode that if you step back for a second, you'll realize a lot of the stuff that you're missing. And people are so stuck in a habit of waking up, going on your phone, brushing your teeth, going on your phone, getting ready to shower, going on your phone, playing music while you're in the shower, getting on your phone the second you get out of the shower in case someone texted you while you were in the shower, getting ready with your phone in front of your face so you can, do your hair and everything while you have something else to do. You can't just look at yourself in the mirror because God forbid that happen. Going downstairs preparing breakfast while you have your phone in your pocket, playing TikToks that you can't even see, which is a primary function of TikTok so that you can see things. You're playing the audio in your pocket because you need something else to be doing. It's such a habit. It's such a habit. It's so hard to get out of.
And I mean, I guess we got to talk about why that is a bad thing for your mental health. Because if you just say it like that, it's like, yeah, okay, I'm making breakfast and watching a YouTube video on the side. Like, what's so awful about that? But I think that's where that, like, feeling of constant, like, want comes in. At least for me, that's what it did. Like, I would, like, not want to go shower because I'd have to step away from my YouTube video. And then also at the same time, I was feeling miserable because the only thing I was getting done in the day was watching these YouTube videos. So
Yeah.
it's like a closed loop that's like, and while you're in it, it's so hard to break out of, even if you're aware of it. Like, I find myself all the time, like, even today on the bus, like, I just picked up my phone and started playing a little game. And like the thought never even occurred to me that, wow, on the bus rides where I've intentionally not picked up my phone, I felt a lot better afterwards. But like I still go back to my phone. Like, what is it about the phone that is so addicting?
I have no idea.
Even if it's completely destroying my mental health, I still do the same thing over and over again.
Yep. And we'll cover this more in the next chapter, but there's something about dopamine regulation that correlates with addiction, not just with your phone, but with everything else. And that would provide a little bit of insight as to the brain processes that are going on. But as for just the general public being aware of how habitual their phone is, short of like the government putting restriction on phones, which I don't think will ever happen, I don't see a way out of it.
And it's so odd because, like, if I'm sitting on the bus and I'm not hyperbolizing this, as the only one, besides the bus driver, I would hope, that's not on their phone on the bus.
Well, you never know
That's
now.
not an exaggeration, but, like, I'll look around and I don't know, I feel so, like, self-conscious almost? Do you know what I'm trying to say?
Yeah, it's hard to break out of the mold. Even if you know the mold
Yeah.
is bad for you, it, it's a habit to follow societal standards.
I feel like it's, I mean, maybe it's just that it's easier to fall back into a habit than to consciously try to change the habit.
Of course, it's easier. Getting better is never easy.
Yeah.
Ever. You always have to have some kind of
Yeah,
conflict.
that is true. One interesting thing about social media addiction that I saw in myself as well. That's why I was like, interesting. Um, that same article I've been quoting says similarly. Yeah. Okay. Let me like find the quote. Just pick a random place to read in the passage and then just hope it's the right one. Okay. It says excessive use of social media, which is indicative of addictive use, is characterized by being preoccupied by social media, salience, using social media in order to reduce negative feelings, mood modification. So that second one, especially, like modifying your own mood, like I find that a lot of the time I get sucked back into my phone because I'll be like, oh, I'm anxious about where I'm going or what I'm about to be doing. So the easy way out is to just distract myself on my phone. But then I don't deal with the anxiety. The anxiety gets worse, right?
Yeah,
Rather than just sitting in there in that moment and like trying to like naturally calm myself down, like I've realized that I would just reach for my phone and just like start scrolling, start doing whatever. But then that becomes such a habit that it's like every time I get anxious about anything, like I'm immediately on my phone because it provides that temporary relief. But then over time, it makes the bad feelings worse.
this is so strange to me because I find the exact opposite to be true.
Really? What do you
Like
mean?
when I'm experiencing like a really bad day, either superficially or internally, mental health or otherwise, I'll usually just like sit on my bed and starfish and look at the ceiling and just be like, shit, like shit. And then I'll get up and I'll do stuff. And I think that has been a recent thing because I had a really bad night last night. I'm not even going to lie to you. I got no sleep. I did not fall asleep at all last night. And I got up this morning and had to do school. So it was super overwhelming of my own will. Like I chose not to go to bed last night. It's a kind of reset for me. But I feel like in the past I would have handled that a lot worse. I spent the majority of last night literally just laying on my bed and looking at the ceiling and just breathing because nothing else is going to fulfill me in that moment. I feel like shit. Nothing's going to change that. Like I just have to wait until the next day comes until I can make the next action to move forward. In the past, I feel like I would have put on like really sad music and scrolled through TikTok for several hours until I felt the urge to cry, at which point I would and then just go to sleep. But now I almost enjoy sitting with the feeling because I know it's not permanent. And that's something that I've had to learn outside of social media because you get a skewed perception of what is happening. Even with the encouragement of awareness of mental health and everything, you have a perspective of, oh my God, this is happening to so many other people too. And instead of finding a sense of community within that, you're like, it's never going to end. All these other people are experiencing it too. I'm just going to sit here and watch these videos because nothing I do is going to change anything. Which is true to an extent because I haven't found in my experience that I can do anything to make a really bad mental health day better. I think it's something that you kind of just have to live through and kind of just have to have the past experiences and the strength to be like, okay, you know what? I'm not going to turn back to any bad habits or anything like that. But it's not true in the sense of you can just lift up your cube of despair and scroll on it and you're no longer going to feel like that because it's either going to be put away and brought back up to the surface or it's just going to be minimally fulfilling in the moment.
Yeah, I feel like you just put into words kind of what I've been learning almost. That sounds really odd to say, but I've been thinking about the idea of momentum, I suppose, because I find that like when I like go out and do things with my day, like I do things with my day until the end of my day, and then I feel a lot more fulfilled. And even if I watch one or two YouTube videos, like it's not the end of the world, you know? But if I give into that urge to watch YouTube videos, like I get so sad because I'm like, I haven't done anything with my day, and these just laying in bed watching videos has made me feel worse.
Yeah.
So it's like counterintuitive, but I think it's probably reaching for that like fast dopamine hit, like that like short, you know what I mean? But it's like a very temporary, not even a relief really, because I
No.
wouldn't say like I feel good watching that video if I'm having a bad day.
Just
It's just like
distraction.
it's just a distraction, yeah. But I feel like that's what I used to do on my phone like all the time. Like I'd be on the bus and I'm like, well, I don't want to sit here with my thoughts, so I'll just distract myself from them. But then that kind of perpetuates the thoughts, like that makes them stick around longer and they also get worse.
Yeah.
So I think that ties into the study that you were quoting in the beginning too. That like negative like
Yeah.
interactions on social media, like you don't feel it at first, but you feel it down the line.
Yeah. It's also, I would say that, and I don't have anything to back this up, just from my experience, productivity as a whole has gone downhill since social media came into existence. People aren't spending their time wisely. And you don't feel that until after you look at your day. And many people don't even look at their day. They don't evaluate what they've done in a day. So it's just a constant cycle where there's no questioning. But even if you do question, momentum has a lot to do with it. Motivation, determination, all these characteristics that people used to have and utilize on the daily are now being spent on this feels better right now because I don't want to do anything hard.
Yeah, I think that's very true. Social media is like that very quick dopamine boost. If dopamine's the right one, the right chemical
It's
there.
adrenaline and dopamine, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but
I mean, there's a reward response in your brain anyway for anything you enjoy doing, even slightly. It's really crazy how the brain works because you create neural pathways with everything that you do. So there's already a road. There's already a road there. If you keep taking it, it's just getting deeper and deeper, so it's hard to climb out the sides.
that makes a lot of sense.
Analogy.
And then it's so easy to fall back down the sides. And for why?
Well, because other roads cross over it. Almost all of your daily habits involve social media. So you have one road that's getting ready and one road that's I don't want to use social media anymore. But that road crosses over. So if you don't make a bridge there, if you don't create good habits, you're just going to fall in and have to climb out again.
That was one of the craziest things I've ever heard. I will be thinking about those sentences for the next month straight. You just have to build the bridge over the tunnel
Yeah.
so you don't fall back in.
But bridge is manual labor, man. You got to work on that shit. That's not going to just happen. You can't just be like, I want to quit social media. I've done that, but I'm going to get ready the same way that I've gotten ready every day. You're going to get back to social media. You have to work on that shit. It doesn't just happen.
Haley, I think you just changed my life. I'm just gonna think, whenever I'm like, fuck, I really want to watch YouTube while I brush my teeth, I'm gonna be like,
build a bridge.
I need to start building that bridge though. The visual imagery in my head right now is absolutely scrumptious.
Scrumptious.
Scrumptious. Oh my god. Yeah, I mean, I think I started this podcast episode with a very like, let's explore some of the positives of social media. Woo, yeah. And now my mind has once again, I feel like our point has been proven to me once over again that social media is overwhelmingly negative. So that was the episode for today. Hope you enjoyed. Thank you for watching.
Make sure to tune in next time for our episode on dopamine regulation.
See you then.